This is Matthew Kent with FlightTrajectory.com, and I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about the flight instruments in an airplane. What you're looking at here is the cockpit for a Cessna 172, and the 6 basic flight instruments are in the center. The first instrument is the airspeed indicator. Now, the airspeed indicator is basically like a speedometer in your car. It tells you how fast you're moving through the air. Now, the airspeed indicator is in terms of knots instead of miles an hour. Well, what is a knot? A knot is simply 1 nautical mile per hour. A normal mile per hour, or a normal mile rather, is 5,280 feet, whereas a nautical mile is 6,000 feet and some odd change. So 1 knot is slightly faster than 1 mile an hour. Second flight instrument in the center is the attitude indicator. Now, the attitude indicator is one of the most important, maybe the most important instrument that we have in the airplane. And it gives us a direct indication of pitch and bank. It tells us what the aircraft is doing. Are we banked to the right, banked to the left, pitched up, pitched down, etc. If you look at the very top of the attitude indicator, you'll see a small orange triangle, and it's pointing to a white line. Now, that white line is the bank indicator. That's 0 degrees of bank. On either side of that, you'll see white ticks. There's 4 white ticks. The first one is 10 degrees, second one's 20 degrees, next one's 30 degrees, and the last one is 60 degrees of bank. Now, in the middle of the attitude indicator, there's a larger orange triangle, and right above that is 2 black lines, a small black line and a slightly larger black line. The first black line is 5 degrees of pitch up, and then the next one is 10 degrees. So our triangle in the middle, when it's pointing to either of those black lines, is showing you your degrees of pitch up or pitch down, and the little triangle at the top shows you degrees of bank. The next flight instrument is the altimeter. The altimeter is also a very important instrument because we need to know how high we're flying. The altimeter reads basically like a clock. There's a small hand that points to the thousands of feet, and then the larger hand points to hundreds of feet. The small hand right now is pointing between the 0 and 1, so we're around 500 feet. Now, to figure out exactly how high we are, look at the big hand, and it's sitting on the 6, and the big hand reads hundreds of feet, so we're at 600 feet right now. The next instrument is the turn coordinator. Now, the turn coordinator has 2 parts to it. The first part is the miniature airplane in the center. Now, the miniature airplane, when it'll turn, and let's say the right wing was pointed down at the little tick with the R on it. That means we're turning right at a rate of 3 degrees per second. Now, the important thing to remember about the turn coordinator is that it doesn't give you a direct indication of bank, meaning that when that miniature airplane banks, that doesn't tell you that you're banking X number of degrees. It just tells you that the plane is physically changing headings at a rate of 3 degrees per second. The second part is the ball underneath the miniature airplane. Now, it's just a black ball in a tube of fluid, and it just reacts based on centrifugal force. If centrifugal force is pulling to the left, then that ball will slide to the left of center, and vice versa. Now, the thing is, in a car, when you're going around a turn, you'll feel the centrifugal force pulling you to the outside of the turn. The difference is, in an airplane, though, when you're turning, you're also banked as well. So if you're turning properly, then you're not going to feel centrifugal force pulling you to the outside of the turn. Now, the rudder basically controls the quality of the turn. If you're doing what you're supposed to with your rudder, then the ball should be centered and stay right in the middle. But if your rudder's not where it should be and it's out of whack, then the ball will come outside of center. Now let's say you're going around a turn or even climbing or just in straight and level flight, and the ball is resting outside of the little cage in the middle there. It's hanging out to the right where the arrow is. What that means is that you just step on the ball, meaning push on the right rudder pedal until the ball comes back into center. If you push too far on the rudder, then the ball will swing all the way to the outside to the left, meaning you need a little bit of left rudder. So the ball, in essence, just tells you what you need to do with the rudder to stay in coordinated flight. Beside the turn coordinator, we have the heading indicator. Heading indicator just tells us what direction we're flying. And if you look at the numbers, you see starting at the top of the airplane that's in the center of the heading indicator, there's 9, and to the right of that 12, then 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, etc. What you have to do to those numbers is add a 0. So 9, add a 0 at the end of it, that's 90. You're on a heading of 90 degrees, that's east. Looking at our main headings, north, south, east, west. North is a heading of 0 or 360. East is a heading of 90. South is a heading of 180 degrees. West is a heading of 270 degrees. The miniature airplane in the middle points to what direction you're flying. So right now we're actually at about 95 degrees. Each little white tick is 5 degrees of on your heading. Now, if the 0, if you look on the left wing of the miniature airplane in the middle of the heading indicator, if 0, if that was up where the nose is, where the 9 is, then we'd be on a heading of north. So right now we're on a heading of east, and if the 0 were on top, that'd be a heading of north. Beside the heading indicator, we have the vertical speed indicator. The vertical speed indicator is actually pretty simple in nature. It simply tells us how quickly we're climbing or descending. And it gives that information to us in terms of feet per minute. If the needle were pointing up at the 5, it's in terms of hundreds of feet per minute, so we'd be climbing at a rate of 500 feet per minute. If it were up at the 10, that's 1,000 feet per minute, meaning that it would take us a minute to climb 1,000 feet. Alright, below the vertical speed indicator, we have the tachometer. Now, the tachometer is our indication of power, what we're doing with the throttle, which the throttle is the black lever that the red arrow is pointing at. And this is basically like the gas pedal in your car. Now in your car, if you want to go faster, you push down on the gas pedal, while in an airplane, we push the throttle in. And that the indication of how much power we're using is the tachometer. Now right now the needle is resting just below the 10 on, that'd be about 9, that's 900 RPM. If it were at the 15, that'd be 1500 RPM, the 20 would be 2000 RPM. Full power is usually about 2500 RPM, give or take. The red knob next to the throttle is the mixture control, and in short, the mixture control controls how much fuel is going to the engine. There's a certain ratio of air to fuel that we want to achieve. Most of the time on the ground when the engine's running, we're going to leave it pushed in full rich, which means rich mixture means that we have the most amount of fuel to air. Now as we climb up, the higher we go, the air gets thinner. And because the air is thinner, we actually need to lean out the mixture and use less fuel. Otherwise, the engine could choke itself out and die. So as we climb, we start leaning out the mixture to compensate for the reduced air density. And then finally, if we pull the mixture control all the way out, that's cut off. That completely cuts off all fuel going to the engine, and the engine will die. So, a real quick review of everything. Airspeed indicator is just that. It tells us our speed through the air. Attitude indicator gives us a direct indication of pitch and bank of what the aircraft is doing. Altimeter tells us how high we are. The little hand points to the thousands of feet, and the longer skinny hand points to hundreds of feet. Turn coordinator tells us our quality of turn and our rate of turn, meaning how many degrees per second we are turning. Heading indicator tells us what direction we're flying, and it gives us in 5-degree increments. Vertical speed indicator tells us our rate of climb and rate of descent, how fast we're climbing or descending in terms of feet per minute. And the tachometer gives us our power setting in hundreds of RPM. The black knob is for the throttle. Push it in for full throttle, pull it all the way out towards you for idle. And the red knob is for the mixture. Push it in is full rich, meaning the most fuel. Pulling it out all the way is lean, and eventually all the way out is mixture cutoff. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure whether or not you take flight lessons or if you just want to play around with Flight Simulator, that this lesson will be useful to you. And I also want to take a minute to invite you to go to flighttrajectory.com and click on the offer page, and you can get a special deal on our other products and video lessons that we have. And also you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/flighttrajectory. Thanks for watching, and happy flying.